Hello friends and welcome back to House of Props. I've recently been playing Horizon Forbidden West and there are so many awesome weapons in the game, but the one that grabbed my attention the most was this Quen guard sword, so I decided to make one on my 3D printer. Usually my 3D prints are straight out prints, but this time I wanted to try something a little different. So I 3D printed the sword, but incorporated physical textures like rope, hemp, and canvas into the build to make it feel more like an authentic prop. So let me show you what I did. When taking on a build like this, I like to start by plotting out the actual scale and size of the final sword. This helps me figure out my approach so that when I switch to using CAD, I can build everything based off of measurements from my drawing. I assemble the pieces by squeezing a couple of drops of CA glue into the support holes, then insert the support and make sure that the texture and the edges align, and then use zip kicker to cure the glue quickly so I can move on to the next piece. The seam on the grip isn't as important as the others because it will be covered later on when we build up the grip with textures. If you take the time to align your seams, it will save you from needing to do a lot of finishing work. While I finish assembling, I would really appreciate it if you would go ahead and click the subscribe and notification bell so you can be notified when a brand new video drops. To smooth away the print lines, I'm using a 220 grit sandpaper on the hand sander. When using a hand sander like this, you don't want to hold it in one place for too long or the friction will cause your print to heat up and warping or surface damage may occur. When I've sanded what I can with a hand sander, I switch to a piece of 180 grit sandpaper and finish smoothing the surface. The hand sander with the 220 gets rid of the majority of the lines, but the 180 grit sandpaper will help just clean up any areas that were missed. The sword's teeth are a little tricky to sand, just take your time and everything will be fine. Next, take some glazing and spot putty and generously apply this to the seams. This is toxic, so make sure you follow the manufacturer's safety instructions. When it has completely dried, smooth it with a 240 grit sandpaper. You want to remove a lot of it and just leave it in the seams. Next, I glued the teeth into place. The metal part of the sword gets 14 of them. Just place a little CA glue on the flat edge. Place in the sword's channel. And set with zip kicker. The piece with the holes also gets 14, but align the teeth so the curved edge in the tooth is in line with the hole. Once all glued, I then apply 3 coats of a 2-in-1 filler and sandable primer. If you sand in between each coat, you can get a very smooth surface and no one will ever know it was a 3D print. I usually use a 180 grit sandpaper to sand each coat before proceeding on to the next. Just make sure to remove any sanding dust before you spray with the next layer of primer. Next, I'm going to spray the teeth with a metallic silver spray paint. If some silver gets on the edges of the sword, it's even better, and you'll see why in a minute. When the silver is dry, I spray it with a coat of hairspray. This will seal the silver layer so we can get some great aging effect further on. Next, I tape off the teeth on the metal part of the sword and spray only this piece with a light gray primer. While this primer is still tacky, if you take a toothpick and rub the edges, it will remove the paint and you can see the underlayers show through. This makes the edges look dented and banged, and as you can see here, we can now see the silver layer that was underneath. You can also take a wire brush and scratch up the surface for even more aging detailing. While the gray primer finishes curing, I base this piece that's going to look like wood in a tan made by mixing white, yellow ochre, and a little raw umber. When that dries, I dry brush the surface with burnt umber to create some wood graining. Now that the gray is dry, I'm going to paint the bevel on the sword with an airbrush to avoid brush marks. I'm using pavement gray thinned with rubbing alcohol, and I've taped off the rest of the blade, only exposing the bevel. The alcohol helps thin the paint so that it can pass through the airbrush. It evaporates very quickly, which is great to avoid drips and runs. When you remove the tape, it may remove some of the gray base, which is great. It just adds another layer of aging to the sword. A toothpick can be used to age up these edges as well. While the blade sets and dries completely, I dry brush some white onto the wood piece. The white will knock back the brightness of the paint job and help the wood to begin to look like a weathered piece of driftwood that was salvaged to add to the sword. I also thin some white with water and brush this around each of the holes, and just blend out the edges slightly. Next, I paint on the orange accent areas on the blade. Here I'm just using a bright safety orange, but not neon. Next, I take a natural fiber rope and glue it through each of the holes in the wood so that it looks like it is holding the teeth into the wood. Then I attach the wood to the top of the blade with CA glue. Next, I took some of the extra rope and glued it into the holes at the end of the blade and the holes at the tip of the wood. The rope is too new looking and I want to bleach it out, so I thin some white paint and brush this into the fibers. Next, it's time to wrap the handle. I start with a piece of raw canvas and glue this onto the handle, making sure to press the canvas tight onto the surface. Then I wet the end of the canvas that will be visible with a little bit of water. Then using some light cobalt blue paint, I brush this onto the wet canvas. This will soak into the canvas, making it look like it's old and faded. Then a second smaller piece of canvas is glued on top of the first. The ends toward the blade align, but the bottom piece of canvas sticks out near the pommel. Then a mix of tan and cadmium yellow is worked into the wet surface of the second piece. Then a third, even smaller piece is added to this. I frayed the edges a little more on this piece since it's the top layer and would receive more wear and tear over time. Next, I take 3 pieces of hemp cord, tie the ends in a knot, and glue the knot under the edge of the canvas wrappings. Then I twist and wrap the cord around the top piece of canvas. Try to keep your twist tight and place the cord tightly against itself when wrapping. As you wrap, you can overlap in areas just to change up the surface and make it more interesting. Then I treat the hemp cord the same as the canvas by first wetting the surface and then brushing on a cobalt blue. Try to work the paint into all the grooves of the twist so the cord will look like it has been dyed. Then I take some watered down raw umber and add some aging spots to the canvas and the hemp. I also add some of this to the fiber rope as well, just to help with the aging process. You can skip this next step if you want, but I wanted to add some copper wire to the handle similar to the version in the game. I stick the end into the canvas layers and wrap the wire around the area where the hemp cord is. The copper just helps add another texture element to the sword. The wire is too new looking, so I take away some of its shine by brushing some burnt sienna onto spots. Then I mix some white with some blue and green to get a patina color and brush this onto spots along the copper wire just to add another layer of aging. So the color isn't so pronounced, I dab it with a cloth just to soften and blend it. The final step is to add aging to the sword's teeth. To do this, I thin some black acrylic, brush this onto the teeth, and dab with a cloth. You want to dab and not wipe because dabbing will leave some of the paint behind and you will end up with a tarnished metal looking surface, which is perfect for this project. And there you have it, a 3D printed Quen sword from Horizon Forbidden West. It took some time to add all the non-3D printed elements, but the final result I think is totally worth it. Let me know what you think or if you have any questions, and if you would like to make one for yourself, you can find a link to the files in the below description. I hope you liked this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up, share it with friends and family, and don't forget to subscribe to House of Props. And remember, if you are building any of my builds or using any of my templates, feel free and tag me at House of Props on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok, because I would really like to see your fantastic work. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.